Hello everyone, my name is Jill Dickens and I send greetings. Hello, how are you? From here in Los Angeles. I'm part of the South Bay sector of the Los Angeles International Church of Christ. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever this finds you. I just want to say hello and what a humbling convicting experience it is to kind of share my heart with you a little bit about some of the things that I've been studying out. 2020 has been a very interesting year. I mean, I've had some hard years, but this is probably the most interesting year, to say the least. I mean, we have COVID. Here we're having a lot of racial issues, protests, riots, all kinds of really humanistic things going on. And it's really, these difficult times have caused me to really do a hardcore self-examination of who I am as an individual and what kind of impact I've really had on the community around me. And is it the kind of impact that God has intended for me to have? And subsequently, I've had a lot of hard talks, and I think it's been really great with people, not necessarily hard in the sense that it was attitudes towards me or we needed to get resolved, but really people sharing their intense feelings. Definitely people of color being able to talk about their experiences, talk about really dynamics in church, because let's be honest, we're a church full of sinners, and unfortunately we bring that to our family. And so it's been really good to have conversations, and they've pained me and pierced me to the heart and really caused me to figure out, have I been the best friend? What do I need to do to make a difference? And it's always great because when you see people you love suffer, that suffering with them is so important for change. And you know, here obviously we have all kinds of injustices, as there are all across the world. We have COVID-19 that's hitting us crazy, obviously everywhere. And we have, as a result, I mean, we've always had this epidemic here in America called rebelliousness. And so it makes sense that we're kind of put on a timeout for the time being. And for me, I think the most, really like the most important thing I've learned for me is how one person or an individual's impact can have on their entire community. And so for here, we have things started opening up. People started being able to go out and to hang out, and you know, from quarantine, and people were refusing to follow the guidelines, and then we had spikes, right, in cases and like all of these things going on, and therefore we now have to roll things back, and we're pretty close to square one. And it's really disheartening, but it's really because people just want to do what they want to do. And it's made me really look at my selfish nature and have I condoned, have I not dealt with, how have I not confronted the things that I saw? And so for me, I felt some type of way, and I started really just examining the concept of righteous indignation. And obviously, this is such a huge, broad impact and like such a huge, broad topic that, again, we could talk about this for hours, but this is a quiet time. And so I just want to kind of share some of the basics of things I've learned and what's helped me put them, you know, I've really started beginning to implement as much as I can. I mean, I'm quarantining, I have a health issue, so obviously I have the privilege of working from home, and so I've been kind of like a hermit, and this is my reality right now. But I'm lucky in so many ways, so no complaints at all, but it's giving me a lot of time to examine. And so for me, I really wanted to know the difference between, okay, righteous indignation, what really the root of that is, and criticalness, like when we justify, oh no, I'm righteously indignant, but really it's just an opportunity to be critical, which isn't beneficial to our church family at all. So righteous indignation really is typically a reactive emotion of anger. And it's usually over mistreatment, insult, or malice of another. In the context of Christianity, righteous indignation or righteous anger isn't sinning, obviously, in your anger. It is anger from sin. So our anger is a result of seeing sin. That could be racism. That could be slander. That could be pride. That could be adultery. That could be all of those things, dissensions, factions, all of those sin, and then acting on it. So acting on what we see, not necessarily acting and reacting in our anger. And it's really acting from a place of conviction, and it's reacting, right, and acting in a righteous manner. And I always, for me, the most beautiful alliteration of that and image for me is really Jesus in the temple courts. And obviously in every single gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they talk about Jesus in the temple courts. And I'm choosing to read just the portion from John 2. And I'm using the Gospel of John because he's the one that talks about the weaving of the cords. Like in Matthew 21, he talks about how Jesus asked them questions and confronted those that were selling in the temple. But this one really, for me, just kind of gives me a clear picture of righteous indignation. And so John 2, verses 14 through 17 says, "In the temple courts he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. To those who sold doves, he said, 'Get those out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market.' His disciples remembered that it is written, 'Zeal for your house will consume me.'" And so obviously in the temple courts, the temple was for one purpose, worshiping God. And they were turning it into, basically Jesus was upset because they were monetizing God. They were turning something that was supposed to be worship into something of, gaining money, making an income, a monetary gain. So basically they were monetizing God. And so he clearly, and even on any YouTube, no matter where you are in the world, like watching, if you have access to internet, like watching a video on YouTube about weaving a whip, it takes time. It's not something that you can just snap your fingers and like, okay, here it is. He really weaved the cords together. So he was virtually making this whip to like drive them out, which means he gave it thought. He didn't react. He wasn't reactionary. So reacting is different than reactionary. Reactionary is like, here's this impulse, I'm going straight for it. And usually we regret those reactions that we react to in a reactionary manner. Gave it thought. Most likely knowing Jesus. What was he doing the entire time? Praying. I mean, we can draw that healthy conclusion. And just really kind of working that out. And it was really a huge, huge violation of God. So it required a huge action. And indignant, really, if you just even look in the Webster's dictionary, says feeling or showing anger or annoyance at what is perceived as unfair treatment. So it's having a feeling of anger because of something that you see that you know is a super huge violation. And for us as Christian, it's usually sin. And conversely, criticalness, if you look this up in the Webster's dictionary, it says inclined. So your intent is to find fault or to judge with severity, often too readily, occupied with or skilled in criticism, and it's involving judgment. And I think of that scripture in 1 Corinthians 5:12. What business is it of mine, right, to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside? So obviously, as disciples, we judge other disciples. We don't judge people that aren't disciples because came here, right, like Jesus, to seek and save the lost. Like, We're not in judgment of that. But we do judge each other as Christians, but what is our standard we judge each other by? The Bible. So it's not us being the judge and jury, but it's the Bible that we're judging each other by. And another scripture, when I was studying this out, that really helped me make this connection and how I need to react and be as a person, it says in Romans 12:16, it says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. And really, when you think of me, because I worked in the court system for a really long time, when I think of the way American courts are set up, you have the judge and you have the jury, and they're usually on an elevated platform. The judge is in front of everybody. They're here. Jury's usually on the side somewhere. And then you have everybody else that's down here. And so really you're in a place to make a judgment. You are making a judgment on the facts that are presented. And when we are critical, we become the judge and jury, and we don't allow God to really work in that way. And that is super hard because we see from our perspective. God has this huge view, right? And we only see through our lens, and we're making a judgment based on that. And a lot of times we're like, okay, we need to confront what we see. 100% we need to confront what we see. Like, these are the things that I'm learning, obviously, right? You confront what you see, but we confront it from a biblical standpoint and not because we're ticked off. I mean, I have to commute in LA on the 405, which is the worst freeway ever. And it is so frustrating. And there's times I get super agitated and angry and all of that, and I'll react. And that is not righteous anger. That is just simply anger. And reacting in that anger is sinful. But that is the biggest thing. Anger itself isn't. It can be a catalyst for us to really say, hey, that's not cool. This is why it's not okay. That is really A, B, C, and D. And we can go through the whole litany and the whole list of this is why this is a sin, or this is why I'm super frustrated, or I'm whatever. It's us being able to be righteous and align ourselves with God. And finally, in Proverbs 12:16, it says, fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. And so for me, that's the thing. Am I going to be slow to speak and quick to listen? Am I going to be reactionary and try to be justified in saying, well, this is just what I see, so I'm gonna whatever, and react in it? Or am I gonna be prudent and I'm gonna seek to understand, and am I gonna address 100%? Am I going to address what I see according to the Bible, and I'm gonna react to Jesus? Like, that's what I've learned at this whole thing. If there is an injustice, I need to confront it, and I need to figure out what I need to do to make it better and to change it and be part of the solution and not part of the problem, and not spend time in my head making judgments and casting those onto other people, because really what that is it caused dissensions, and it doesn't solve anything. And that's just some of the stuff that I've learned, and I really appreciate this, and sorry if it went long. I really appreciate the opportunity to share, because in sharing this, I'm relearning it all over again, and I have a long way to go as a person and as a disciple. And so thank you so much, and I hope all of you are doing well, and I love you.